Hello, hello, welcome. Hey everyone, welcome to the stream today. Yeah, hey, I'm excited to be here. This is, admittedly, a kind of a trial run, so we'll see how it goes. Hey, what's up, Than? Oh, hey, Mindy. Hello, welcome. We're here to talk today about what goes into designing a session of D&D, of name your favorite other TTRPG. Welcome, friends. Now, the key here, right? I'm happy to talk a lot about all this stuff, but it's also a conversation. So, as you are here in chat, feel free to chime in and say, "Oh, hey, what about this?" Or, "Hey, I have a question about that," or, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Because it's very much a dialogue. So do please feel free to contribute, as that's an important part of this. Before we get started, let me just really quickly, if for some reason you're here and you don't know who I am, first of all, welcome. I'm very glad that you're here. My name is Josh. We do this every couple of days. We stream here. Hey, what's up, Drop the Die? Good to see you. And so today we're just gonna chat about what goes into designing an adventure. On some very basic levels, we'll talk about what makes for good game design, and then we can also talk about some of the finer points too. So a little bit of everything here. If you're interested in seeing my... Oh, hey! Thanks for those gift subs. Wow. Now no one can see my face. This is perfect. I've clearly thought this through. Thank you, Mindy. Okay. That's gonna be fun. Clearly I thought this through. Anyways. So, if you want to see the fun that I'm talking about here, talking about types of, encounters or things like that, a great way to see some of that would be to check out some of the many games that I'm involved in. Thanks for all the additional gift subs there, Mindy. I appreciate it. It's all good. You all are gonna have to forgive the alert sounds. Anyways, if you would like to check me out on stream, I'll lean over here so you can see my face through the alerts. You can come and hang out on Fridays over at Rock Punch ATL on Twitch, where I'm part of the Sina Una streamed game called Tampo. It is using the Sina Una setting that recently released with phenomenal DMing skills from HTT Paladin. If you don't know him, he is phenomenal. So definitely worth checking it out. Because he tugs at our heartstrings every single session. Yeah. Okay, one more thank you to Mindy. Thank you. That's very kind and appreciated. They don't stop coming. They don't. Never. Okay. All right. Wow. Was not expecting that to be as distracting as it was. It's all good. So what we're gonna do today, and I'll flip over to my other screen in a second, is we are going to take one of my favorite D&D adventures of all time from 3rd edition. You can find it in the Book of Challenges. The green screen is not playing nicely with that. It's fine. It is a phenomenal adventure that I've got in here called A Familiar Situation. It is written for 1st and 2nd and maybe 3rd level players, and it is basically an encounter where you find yourselves hunting down and trying to catch lost animals that have escaped from their cages. And what I love so much about this adventure is it's incredibly straightforward. You know what you're doing. You're trying to catch animals, but it is very low stakes, so you're not going to die in combat here. And that is why I have actually adopted this particular module, this particular challenge from the book, as my go-to session 0. Anytime I'm running a new game and I'm trying to teach new players, I use this particular adventure. So we're going to kind of analyze this particular adventure as we go along. It's kind of a case study as we chat about how do you go about designing an adventure. So let me just get this book situated over here, and we will get started. So very wholesome trolling. Hey, what's up, JT Bossmaster? Yeah, so y'all will have to let me know if you can see the text on this screen here well enough. Let me know if you can't. I can make it slightly larger if you'd like. Maybe bring it up to 200. Okay. Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Mindy. You're the best. So, let's talk about what goes into making a really enjoyable, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to start by just talking about what goes into like a good adventure. Like, what are some things that make a game enjoyable when you play it? There's a couple things that I really look for when I'm trying to write something of my own, which, you know, they don't stop coming. It's all good. Anyway, so there are a couple things that I look for when I am designing an adventure. I often want to start, and let's make some bullet points as we go along here. I often want to make sure that there's a very clear focus, right? That there's a point to why the players are doing what they're doing, especially if you're writing something that's intended to be a one-shot that you want to get done in 3 to 4 hours. There needs to be some kind of streamlined focus for, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And the intro to that session is a great way to bring all that in. So we'll first start here by just saying focused. For this, I tend to look at something that's very straightforward as a good example. For example, something like a heist where, hey, here's the point of the session. You're going to go, you're going to steal this thing, and you're going to get out. That is a great example of a very clear goal, very clear defined goal. It is easy for the players to latch onto and go all in on very quickly. Now, that being said, you don't want to just necessarily say, okay, here's what you're going to do, go do it, and not give the players any agency, because that's very important as part of any game. You want to feel like, as a player, that you are in charge of your own destiny, so to speak. And so you have to, even if it's not really a choice, you have to give them the illusion of having some kind of choice as to what to do. And I want to be clear here in saying that, like, this isn't saying, okay, you have to tell your players that no matter what, you're doing this and you're doing this, and you don't get a choice, you just are doing this. But it's presenting things in a way, hey, Costumer Delight, it's a way of presenting the challenge in front of you, perhaps in a couple of ways. Or perhaps it's a way of, no, it's all good, it's all good. Alert away. Mindy's been doing it all stream so far. It wouldn't be that hard, Strike. I would probably take inspiration from the movie that the song appears in. So that's totally doable. So okay, so as we're talking about this, I'm going to use the example from the Book of Challenges as kind of our thing that we analyze. Yeah, Dusty, Mystery Men. It's a really good. Well, Shrek could. Yeah, it's in both of them, but I am particularly fond of Mystery Men, actually. But so what I like really about this one is it gives you the option of, you can, first of all, at the very, very start of the little adventure, it says, you have to roll like a perception check. In this, it's a listen check because it's 3rd edition, with a very, very low DC to see if you can hear whether or not there is someone in the distance calling for help. And if you succeed on this check, which is, like I said, very, very low, it is quite literally a DC 0 plus 1 for every 10 feet away you are. So if you walk past the room that this is in, it's very simple. At kind of like the first room in a dungeon is kind of how it's designed. Or I often run it as being like in a wizard's tower, or in like a small like pet store is ideal. So let me actually very quickly for you all just read what it says, because I think this will be helpful in understanding the initial like appeal of this adventure. It gives you a little bit of backstory, that a sorcerer went to a supply shop to get a new familiar. They didn't have any in stock, so the shopkeeper has agreed to send over a selection of animals, and has sent 5 animals for the wizard to look at and see which one will be the best. The wizard or sorcerer sends their servant to go and fetch them and bring them back. And this is where the adventure kind of picks up. As the characters approach this area, have them make a listen check. If they succeed, read the following text. From down the corridor, you hear a young man speaking in pleading tones. Come on down. Who's a good girl? Come on. Prufrock, the name of this character, is trying to coax a hawk down from its perch. He isn't being very successful. And when the characters enter this room, you describe the room. It's a little domestic place. But what's important is that this is the whole appeal to this is Prufrock, the servant, is trying to get the animals back in the cage before the wizard or sorcerer returns. You did make it, Kayla. Welcome. And so, it gives a little description of this. But basically, it now goes about describing the creatures that are here in the room. And what I like about this is it's very simple. It assumes that the players are going to say, hey, yeah, you know what, we'll help. But if they don't help, then you can easily add some kind of complication, such as an animal darting out the door when they try to leave. Or perhaps they see the wizard coming back and returning to their abode as they try to leave. There are many ways that you could loop the players back in. I would typically not do that. That's a fair question. Drop the die. I like what passive perception and passive skills do for that. Or at the very least, I would say that someone's passive scores would, if you have a passive higher than the DC, you would automatically notice it, perhaps. That being said, I have played a character before with like a 9 perception, passive perception, so it's possible that that you might find some reason for it, but the lowest DC that I'll put in anything that I run is probably a 10. Because at that point, you've got a 50% chance of succeeding before modifiers, and if the players are thinking like strategically and have whomever is best at a certain type of check perform the check, then it's going to be better than 50% success rate. But that's kind of a choice, you know. Maybe there's like a game where you're arm wrestling a kobold and the DC to win is a strength check of 7. I could see that being a thing. So it's a choice, I feel like, but not one that I would personally make unless there is a reason for it. So we've already said we want it to kind of be focused. We want our adventure to really drive at one main point, which in this case is capturing the animals back in the example that we're using. What we also like about it is that there are multiple ways to pull the characters in. So if they see this plight and say, oh, you know what, I'm not concerned about it, you introduce a complication. You can have the sorcerer come back. You can have an animal run through the door, or another complication that I like, which is actually suggested in the book as a way to perhaps scale up the challenge, would be have there be a druid nearby who is upset that the creatures are being kept in cages, and so they'll cast some spell in order to aid the animals, and perhaps this brings the wizard or the druid into the conflict as well, suddenly making a slightly more challenging encounter. But typically, the way that I frame this particular adventure is you've been hired to take these familiars to a kind of dangerous place, and so they've hired a couple of you to make sure that the delivery gets there, and once you drop off and it's a successful delivery, then please return. So if they get there and the poor servant or whomever it is collecting the familiars as you arrive is terribly clumsy and trips and falls over the cages, knocking them open, and all the critters get out, that's not a successful delivery, because if they run away, you haven't fulfilled your end of the bargain to make sure that they get in to the wizard safely. So that's generally how I've run this in the past. I've used this 3 or 4 times now, and I actually also once ran it as a Pokemon-themed adventure, which was fun too. So it's focused. We've got multiple hooks, so, and you can really do this with anything. And that's what I also like about a lot of very well-written, streamlined one-shot adventures, is you can say, hey, here's your goal, go. And if the party says, you know what, I'd rather go check this other thing out, you can find ways to bring it back in. Similarly, or you know, if you have a piece of information that you wanted to give your party in a tavern, but they decide, oh, I don't want to stay in the tavern, I'd rather go over to the market, then there could be someone gossiping in the market. Or they could go to the local blacksmith who happens to share a little bit of town gossip. There are multiple ways to reel the party in to this particular adventure, which is what I like. But the thing that I love about catching animals is it's so lighthearted. It's so fun. And players get really excited about, like, catching a bird. It's adorable. The first time I ran this as a session 0, there was one of my players who's very excitable. Bless his heart. He was able to catch this animal that had escaped from 2 of the other players, and when he did, he like rolled a natural 20 on like the grapple check and was so excited he like jumped up and tossed his arms in the air and accidentally knocked over like a glass of water. He was so excited about succeeding at this very simple task. But that's the fun about an adventure like this, is it It really pulls you in with like almost this cuteness factor of, yeah, I'm gonna go wrangle some animals. That's kind of fun. So that's kind of my experience there, which is why I particularly like this, because it's something that everyone can get involved in. And I do when I use this adventure. Hey, thanks, Drop the Die. I appreciate you dropping in. Thanks for that follow, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime. So, carrying on. We're looking for an adventure that's going to be focused. We're looking for something that's got a couple of ways to pull people in. And what I particularly like about this is there is one combat encounter built in off the bat. You are trying to wrangle animals. This is a great opportunity as a session 0 to teach combat mechanics without any risk of dying. Essentially, what I also love about this is that it leaves to the DM what that initial, perhaps social encounter that gets this started, it leaves that up to you entirely. I feel like ideally, in 3 to 4 hours, you have room for 2 to 3 serious encounters, and perhaps some smaller encounters built in there. But that's kind of up to how your group plays. So, for instance, I have one D&D group. I actually ran a game for them last night, and I had probably 3 to 4 encounters prepared for them for what wound up being a 4-hour session. And we got through 2 of them because one of them was this huge social encounter of kind of negotiating with an army, try to like find out what was motivating their reason that they wanted to participate in this conflict. And as we did this, it took maybe 2 hours to get through that because it was very in-depth. Multiple people were involved. It took a long time. That group also tends to be very, very roleplay heavy in terms of getting into social encounters, really talking a lot and doing a lot, whereas not every group is going to be like that. And then the majority of the second half of that session was a combat encounter, having made friends with the mercenary army that they were trying to speak with. They wanted to like do some trial by combat type stuff as like a test of strength, and so there were a couple of rounds of like gladiatorial combat where one member from each group would face off, and that just kind of developed naturally, and that was kind of a cool thing that happened. But I do like to include combat in most sessions. I think it's an integral part of D&D as a game, and it's especially more important in especially a one-shot or something that's intended to be 3 to 4 hours. You want some kind of satisfying combat encounter payoff, unless the party really is able to work completely around that. So what I'll put here is 3 to 4 encounters. Sometimes you'll need to drop one. Last night I dropped one because just didn't have time for it, and that's okay. The nice thing about that being an ongoing campaign is we'll just pick up with the next encounter at the start of next session. Easy enough. But for a one-shot in particular, pacing is very important. I feel like the first 10 to 15 minutes of any session really sets the tone for how the rest of the session is going to go. And so you want that hook in those first couple of minutes, particularly of in-character roleplay, if that's what your group is like. You want that to be really impactful. You want that to be fun, so that the players are super engaged, and as the game goes on, you'll have their active participation in the session. So I'll put here, exciting introduction. And so this is kind of we're creating a list of like necessary conditions to write a very good adventure module, which isn't to say that there aren't other ways to do it, but this is what I've found in my experience. Again, at any point, if someone has a question or says, hey, you know what about this? We can also do that too. I have never actually run an encounter as a flashback. That's a neat idea. I feel like doing that in a game, you need to like have an idea for that ahead of time, which would be very cool. And maybe do that as like a dream sequence or something of that nature. I think there's a lot of ways that you could do that. Yeah, a lot of ways to do that would be cool. Just not something that I've ever done personally. Okay, so I'm gonna read to you very quickly. That would be neat. The next little bit of this module, this little challenge here, and it's just a little 2-pager here in this book, as it goes about describing each of the animals listed in the monster manual. The bat has 2 hit points, the cat has 4, the hawk has 8, the rat has 2, the snake is a tiny viper, has 2, and it tells you where each of these critters are in the room and what they're doing and how they would act. And this is really the bulk of what it describes here. But the thing about anything when you're in initiative, when you're in combat, is it's a huge time filler, because one round of actions, while it's 6 seconds in game, could take 5 to 10 minutes. Especially if you've got a party that doesn't have a great like group dynamic yet, that doesn't necessarily play off of each other really well, or if you've got new players, it can take a little while. So combat tends to take a little while, which is good to remember as you are planning out any session. So it tells you where they are. The bat hangs from the ceiling, the cat stands on the bed, hissing and spitting, the hawk is up on a shelf 10 feet above the floor, the rat has gotten into the chest through a small hole, the snake hides under the table. It tells tactics, asks after the NPC asks for help. He's very concerned, so he relies on the heroes to take action. That way the NPC doesn't get any of the glory in the moment as someone catches an animal. Plus, as a DM, if you're running a session, you know that you probably don't want more stat blocks to worry about than you have to. In this case, I would keep the NPC out of that if at all possible, like this adventure does, because you don't really want to have another character going when that's really not the point. The point is to get the party involved. So the bat is scared and doesn't want to move. Since the ceiling is 15 feet up, the characters can't reach it, even if they have a weapon with reach. However, they'll have to perhaps find a way to move a table over or stand on a bed or something to get the bat up off of the ceiling. And there's a little diagram here with, oh boy, that's not showing. All right, never mind. I can't show you. It's just a little diagram of what the room looks like. It says that the cat doesn't want to go back in its cage unless calmed down. Perfect opportunity for an animal handling check or for someone skilled with animal handling to shine in that moment. It attacks anyone who moves adjacent to it. Your cat isn't going to do a lot of damage, but you'll understand how combat works. If you do move close and aren't able to grapple the cat, or aren't able to restrain the cat, then you'll take a claw attack from a cat. It'll be, a damage or 2, not a lot, but enough to say, oh, here's how combat goes. If the door is open, the cat scoots out as soon as someone makes a threatening move. There you go. They've built into this encounter. One of the animals is trying to escape. The hawk perches on a shelf 10 feet off the ground. It's only 5 feet above the clothesline in the room. A character with a reach weapon could strike at it, or if you tried to balance on the clothesline or stand on something tall, you could try to grapple it. It'll defend itself if you attack it. It describes the rat in the chest, says that the chest is locked with a simple lock. This lists a DC 20. I think in 5th edition that would be more like a DC maybe somewhere in the 13 to 15 range. You could adjust that to whatever makes sense. If you don't have a rogue in the group, maybe slightly lower. If you do have a rogue, I think 15 is about the right number there for something that's simple. Especially if this is supposed to belong to a wizard. It's not just going to be like, the average lock that you would find on something of very low quality. Very true. If you try to reach your hand through the hole in the chest to get the rat, it'll bite you. But if you open the chest, it lists some of the stuff that's in there, including the magical components required to cast Find Familiar. But you're able to pull the rat out and grapple it and catch it and put it back in its cage. And it describes that the snake is hiding under the table. It has half cover in this scenario, so it's a little bit harder to hit because you have to get around the table. And has advantage on reflex saves, which would be dexterity saving throws for us. And the snake hisses at anyone approaching, but attacks only to defend itself. It would rather flee than attack, so this gives an opportunity for the players to try to corral it into the cage. And it gives some options. It says here, development, if the characters leave the door open, the animals might flee through it, particularly when attacked or frightened. And then here's a little section that's helpful called scaling the challenge. So if you've got a party above first or maybe second level, you could make it a little more difficult. And here it suggests that perhaps the animals get into a stash of potions. Because if you've got a potion of fire giant strength, or a potion of invisibility, or something of that nature, it would be much harder to catch these animals. Or another way to level it up, it mentions, and I talked about this earlier briefly, having a druid be responsible for casting some kind of spell. Perhaps enlarge, reduce, to make the snake much bigger, or something of that nature. Something to make the combat encounter more challenging. It talks about non-lethal combat and gives some mechanics for that. How to subdue a creature rather than do damage. We don't necessarily need that. And then it talks about grappling as well. This is enough for the time being from this module, but I just want to talk about it, just to explain what this looks like. You'll notice that this doesn't give you any resolution really whatsoever. It just says, hey, here's the setting, go. An important thing to think about in an adventure is, okay, how does this resolve? If the players are successful, do they get rewarded? Does this person thank them? Do they get to keep one of the animals? What is the result for that? And then similarly, if they're unsuccessful, right? If an animal escapes or something of that nature, what happens? Are there consequences? Which is helpful to think about, because ultimately, if you are trying to tell a story in 3 to 4 hours and have it be complete with a beginning, middle, and end, and especially at the end you want a satisfying conclusion based on what happens throughout the session, you kind of want to have that thought ahead, just in case someone throws a curveball at you, something out of left field, so that you have some idea of, okay, how is this going to resolve? So, I'm going to take this adventure that we've just read and begin to adapt it to D&D 5th edition. It's not going to be perfect. I'm not going to write out all the details, but I'm going to give some basics. And for this particular instance, I think what let's do is let's treat this as a scenario where you are walking through the forest in this kind of remote part of the forest. The party is, and you hear this sound in the distance. So this would be if you're doing it as a one-shot, after everyone introduces their character, maybe give them 5 to 10 minutes of role play on the road to get familiar with one another. Actually, something that I've seen done really well before is a role-playing exercise to get into it. This was something that Obo Lauren, who was in chat earlier and may still be around, did in a session that I played with her once or twice, and I really like that as an idea. And the premise behind that is, okay, the party has done this thing before. Describe briefly, like, how would you have contributed to this thing that you've done? I think one example she used was catching an elephant that had run away from the circus, that had gotten lost in the woods. And so everyone's like, oh, well, I'll use this ability, my survival check, to track the elephant, and I'll use my perception to keep an eye out for danger and that type of stuff. And you all kind of describe how you do this together. It takes 5 to 10 minutes, but then you are a little bit more familiar with each other's characters. It's a good time. So that being said, let's get started. We're going to pick up with the party is traveling through the woods. Yeah, it's a really neat way to get just all the characters on the same page very quickly. Because even in that, you can be like, oh, well, I'm gonna, do this thing, and I'm gonna ask so-and-so to help. Or, oh, well, clearly, as the rogue of the group, I'm gonna play this prank on the barbarian who's trying to be helpful. I'm going to do this other thing. You have ways of getting personality into that RP exercise, which I think is great. All right, so our party is traveling through the woods when they hear... Oh, I can spell. Through the trees, we'll say. Now what I'm going to kind of leave out here, just in the interest of time together, is you're going to want to think about, what does this look like? I think it's important when you are setting the scene to use not just what things look like or what things sound like, but try to get as many of the senses as possible. You can almost always get 4, but try to get that 5th one in there. Taste is a little bit hard sometimes. But so let's say that we're traveling through the woods. As a DM, I would give myself a couple of notes. It would look kind of like this. I would say you can see just a short distance between the trees because of how close together the trees are growing. It is densely forested as the type well, I think, instead of think and forget to type. So it's densely forested. The trees are all close together. I would describe, maybe these are oak trees. Maybe these are sycamore trees. But whatever type of tree they are, give some characteristics to them. Describe as the branches reach up into the sky seeking sunlight, but can't find it through the overhanging limbs from the taller trees. Maybe you describe how the leaves crunch on the ground beneath their feet. You can implement the sounds that they hear. The bark is perhaps coarse and rough to the touch, whereas the leaves are broad and smooth. You've got these large, I don't know, like a maple leaf almost, something that's kind of pleasant to the touch. You can pull in these senses. So we'll say densely forested, forest floor covered in leaves, and these are just notes for me. Branches reaching up into the sky. Perhaps there's a smell. If you want to set an ominous tone, perhaps you can smell this smell almost of decay, of the age of the forest. It's perhaps musty or perhaps almost fungal. You can put words to these things, and sometimes you don't even need to necessarily know what it is you're describing. One of my favorite things about playing in settings that are decidedly like not on Earth, either that's a sci-fi game or something a little bit more out there, you can describe trees that look like cactuses with mushroom tops on the end of each branch, and you can see the vibrant colors, the purples and the blues and the pinks that stand out, and this is all backlit by a faintly green tinted sky, and suddenly you've got this completely extraterrestrial image in your party's mind, and you've literally just thrown together words describing things on Earth that don't go together. Sometimes I'll do that running a sci-fi game. I'll be like, yeah, I just need something wacky here. I'm going to describe something wacky. And it doesn't need to be something you've necessarily thought out, although perhaps you do want to think it out to bring it back later. Okay, so we've got some details. What's the noise that they hear? In this case, it will be the servant crying out within this tower. We'll say that it's a wizard's tower in the middle of the forest. And they hear a voice. I don't think that it makes sense to have them call for help because they're just dealing with animals. So perhaps they're just calling out something, perhaps irately. They're frustrated with a creature that isn't responding the way they want to. So they'll say, "Oh, come on, you useless beast." And now we've built in some kind of tension. There's a clear frustration dynamic there that the players will pick up on. And this is where I would also give myself some notes as to what this character is like. As a DM, my notes tend to be super sparse, so it'll just be like 3 descriptors. When you're writing an adventure module, you're going to have to describe the character a little bit more. Perhaps you would describe a rotund halfling with graying hair and a receding hairline. You can hear a hint of panic in his voice as it continues to find new octaves. And you can paint this kind of word picture of what this character is like before you even begin speaking. And then you could try to, voice crack to emulate the character. Or you could say, and he says, "Oh, come on, you useless beast." And you don't even necessarily need to get fully into it. It's kind of your choice as a DM. But when you're writing an adventure module, something that is going to be published, you want to put some more details in there, because the point of a module like that is for someone to be able to pick it up and read it and be able to run it with very little prep time. And if they have to stop and write their own NPCs each step of the way, that's not going to be helpful. For here, we'll just say that this is our halfling servant. And I think Bertrand is a great servant name, so we'll call him Bertrand. And I'll give myself some notes. Rotund, well dressed, but panicked. And now I know a little bit about this character. And perhaps I've got a voice prepared. Perhaps I'll make it up on the fly. Who knows? But perhaps he'll sound like this, a bit playful, but oh, he's so panicked and now he's talking very quickly and it's all running together. Or perhaps it'll be something entirely different. You'll figure it out as you go. That being said, I don't give voice notes, aside from things that are more descriptive of the state that someone is in, rather than what they sound like, because I don't want to pigeonhole a DM into this character has a raspy voice and a lisp. because they may not want to do a raspy voice with a lisp. So I don't want to back them into a corner there. As the party approaches, they'll see this large stone tower, pillaring 25 feet into the air. And you can give some descriptors, some stuff like that. You might mention how out of place it is in a forest that is so densely packed. You might talk about the nature of the stone. Perhaps it's something interesting like a sandstone, or perhaps there's something unique about the tower. Maybe there's bright blue window shutters, or a garden in which all the plants grow upside down. You can come up with some kind of character to this tower. I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but we'll just say a tall stone tower. And I liked the blue window details, so with I'll say constructed out of dark stone with bright blue window shutters. This gives you some details and is helpful, I find, in just bringing the players into the world. Okay, so as we keep moving on, next they have this conversation with the servant character, who is going to try to convince them to help. He'll explain the situation. This is a scenario where I would probably, in this case, I would try to use kind of like a cute voice for this character, because I want the players to fall in love with him immediately and want to help him.
And so perhaps he talks like this, and he's kind of got a little bit of a nasally voice, and it's kind of up here in your higher register, and there's a little bit kind of guttural in some ways. And so he's like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you, but I've accidentally knocked over all these cages of animals, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to put all the creatures back in the cage. Oh, would you be willing to help, please?
And suddenly you've appealed to not just their better nature, but there's almost like this emotional appeal as there's this cute character. Something that I think is really important is varying who your characters are. And so having a very cute character that they need to help is a lot of fun, because then they get really invested in that. Yeah, even the chaotic ones. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Lauren, I think you were there for this game when there was a rainbow owlbear. That one was, we were immediately drawn to that particular character. Yeah, and so giving them a character that they connect with, that they want to protect, is very fun, because then they're suddenly invested in that. So, the character, Bertrand, asks for their help. I'm not going to write out all the dialogue here. Like I said, my DM note style is super light. It's like bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, go. But as you're writing something out, you might give some more details. For now, I'll just say, Bertrand asks the party for their help and promises, well, he may not have anything to offer. Let's say that he doesn't have anything to offer, as he is afraid that when the wizard, afraid that he might get into trouble. Now, before running this session, I would want to know some details. Who's the wizard that he serves? Do they have any particular, organizational affiliations, stuff like that? This would all go in kind of like an overview section. Whenever you write an adventure for publication, there's always the first section is an overview. It's here's what happens at the adventure very quickly. And so it would say the powerful wizard, I don't know, let's come up with a name. I keep wanting to say Morgana. So we'll say Morgana. The powerful wizard Morgana.
And his name is John C.
Hey, what's up, Raiders? Welcome, everyone. Critical Bard is in the house. Hey, friends. We are talking about how to design your own D&D adventure. We've got some notes. We've got a kind of demo challenge that we're using. And we are going through how would you write something, first to run as a DM, and second, how you might then, if you wanted to write this as an adventure to release and publish, you could do that too. We're kind of talking about all of it. If you don't know me, my name is Josh. I am one of the mods over at CB's channel, but in addition to that, if there was anything else in my life that was important beyond being a mod for CB, there isn't, spoiler alert. I also do some freelance tabletop game work. I stream myself a couple days a week. You can see me on Fridays over at the Rock Punch ATL channel for the Tampo. I am not typing in Twitch chat. You can see us, our game over on Fridays at the Rock Punch ATL channel. We're both CB and I are playing in this world using Filipino mythology from the Islands of Sina Una supplement. I highly recommend checking that out. Welcome, friends. If you make a choose your own adventure game, that could be as good as a D&D game. It depends on what you enjoy. Everyone has different tastes. And I kind of said this disclaimer at the beginning. I'll say it again now. This is what works for me. It may not be necessarily the best choice for you or your party. I am kind of, as I'm designing this in mind, keeping my groups of being very roleplay heavy in mind, because they are going to be inclined to want to lean into character moments, conversations. Whereas, if you've got a group that is more excited by combat, then you're going to want to lean into the combat. If you've got a group that's more excited by adventure and exploring a vast world, then you're going to want to write an adventure that does that. Last little bit of catch up, and then we'll continue on. We are using this book of challenges published as a supplement for Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition. One of the first challenges in here is called A Familiar Situation, where the party finds themselves trying to help like a butler or a servant who has accidentally spilled a pile of cages that had animals to be familiars for a wizard. And the party hears this and comes and tries to help. And so we're kind of taking this, we're taking it from 3rd edition, and we're going to adapt it into about a 3-hour adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. While I am using D&D 5e as the rules core for this, you could take the same principles that we're talking about and use it for any other setting. It's a lot of the same principles are going to apply, and then you'll just need to tweak it for whatever setting you're in. So if you're playing Call of Cthulhu and you want to do something that's super dark and spooky, you can take all the same stuff that we've talked about. We've got a couple of key things that make an adventure what it should be. We want it to be focused, right? There's a point and you get to it, and that's your drive you're trying to get to. You want multiple hooks, a couple of things that could bring people in, so that if the first one doesn't work, you've got a second one or a third one that can appeal to the players to get involved. And you want a couple of encounters. 3 to 4 encounters is what I found for a 3 to 4 hour session works, because you're kind of averaging one encounter an hour, but that isn't always combat encounters. Oftentimes, those are social encounters. Anyone who has played in a game with me before will tell you I love social encounters. Let's talk about stuff. Let's have NPCs who are trying to accomplish something, and you have a conversation with them. That's what I love. And I also talk about how the introduction is so critical. If your players are having fun in the first 10 to 15 minutes of a session, you've got their attention for the next 3 hours. If you don't have their attention within those first couple of minutes, if they're not enjoying it, then you're not going to have them as invested, I find. You'll get the players who are on their phones, you'll get the players who aren't super engaged. And while you may still have that, even if you do have a really exciting introduction, it really helps your chances if you can get started with something exciting and fun. So we talked about, at the top of the adventure, your party is traveling through the woods. On some quest, it doesn't really matter what. You can say whatever it is. Your quest is to go free a dragon from imprisonment or something. You give them whatever prompt you want. But the point is, as they're traveling through the woods, they hear a noise through the trees. After you've done the introductions of, okay, hi, my name is Joe. I'm playing a barbarian named Steve. Hi, my name is Steve. I'm playing a ranger named Joe. That type of stuff. Having something really exciting and some good character introductions at the top does so much to make the session run smoothly. So after this, we've just been taking notes. This is what my notes as I DM would look like. As you can see, they're very sparse. We've got some notes about what the forest looks like. The trees are close together. It's densely forested. They hear a voice calling out. It's a halfling servant named Bertrand. I've got some descriptions of him. And here's what he's saying. He's saying, oh, come on, you useless beast, as he's frustrated at these animals that have gotten out of the cage that he can't seem to pull back in. As the party approaches the sound, they see a tower. We give some descriptions. And I talked about how I like to, especially in a one-shot, give them a cute or very memorable NPC to travel with, because that's going to be more appealing, and ultimately the players are going to be more connected to a cute NPC, someone that they immediately care about.
The halfling who speaks like this because he's kind of a little bit nerdy and maybe has a slight congestion problem, but he's got such a good heart.
So that's where we've covered so far. As we continue on, he's going to ask them for help. We would, before getting to this point, want to know who the wizard is, who they may be associated with, and that type of stuff, in order to make sure that there's some very clear stakes laid out. Even if the party doesn't know it, it's helpful for you to know it. Hey, Jordan, how's it going? And like I was saying, as you just came in a published adventure, that's going to all go in the introduction section at the top of the adventure that explains the overview of what happens. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Kestrel. Let's discuss what happens after Bertrand appeals to the party for help. They could respond in a couple of ways. I would put perhaps some additional hooks here. So perhaps this is a wizard that the party knows, and they would be doing them a favor. So we talked about naming our wizard Morgana. Perhaps the wizard Morgana is a friend of the party. That might be a reason for them to help, because they want to assist their friend. Even if the appeal from this adorable little halfling isn't quite enough, they're going to look to help someone that they have a vested interest in. Perhaps there is, and we talked about this already, perhaps there is a druid, maybe even a druid that is a rival of the party. a druid has done something to interfere to make this more challenging. Perhaps has cast Enlarge on one of the animals. Or perhaps the animals, this is the other example given in the book, the animals have gotten into a bunch of potions, and so have taken some potions. And let's say for this case, we'll use 1 potion of invisibility, 1 potion of fire giant strength. Hey, Robo Goblin, how you doing today, my friend? And let's say 3 blink potions, because blink is a nuisance. Because you've got your critters then blinking in and out. They're hard to grab. It's harder to get a hold of them. They're harder to hit in combat. That's a huge challenge and may lead them to want to know more about what's going on. A blink corgi, that's right. And Mindy's back. Thank you for the subs, Mindy. Oh boy. Alrighty. Yeah. We do like our blink corgis, that's true. Okay, well, you have a good one, Mindy. Thanks for hanging out. They don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming. Okay, alright, so, it's gonna keep going. I'm just gonna pretend that it's not going, and I'm sorry. So these are some things that might act as additional reasons for the party to want to be involved. So these are some additional hooks. If the party isn't interested in helping right away, he'll say, "Oh, well, I'm so upset that my boss, the wizard, Morgana, she might not... I'm afraid that she might be really upset with me and turn me into a toad if I don't catch them." And then suddenly, they go, "Oh, Morgana, I know that person. I am suddenly invested in helping them." So yeah, thanks for that posture check. Much appreciated. I'll sit up straighter. Stuff like that. I never write down dialogue. I always improvise that personally, because that's just how I tend to, as a player and as a DM, enjoy doing it. But if you want to write out a speech or something like that, be my guest, go for it. But I'm not going to do that here for the interest of time. Hey, thanks for that host thread, Raiders. I appreciate y'all. All right. So, we're going to assume now that the party has chosen to help. If the party does not choose to help here, then you as a DM find yourself in a bit of a pickle. Because you don't have a way to keep the party engaged here. Now, ideally, the party isn't going to do that. We've given them a couple reasons not to. Perhaps if they choose not to help, the animals escape into the forest. And then a bear will come and attack one of them. And then they're suddenly interested in protecting the life of this cat from a bear. I don't know. You can have a contingency plan for that. We're not going to worry too much about that now, but it's something worth thinking about. As you're designing an encounter, as you're designing a session, you want to have that in mind. But I would view this conversation as perhaps the first social encounter. This should take maybe 10 minutes, give you some time to get into the character, explain everything that's going on, give them some perception checks to see what's happening inside. So you might describe the interior, what it looks like. But let's say for now that Bertrand is on the inside of the tower and has not opened the door for fear of letting the animals loose, and they're on the outside. So at this point, perhaps Bertrand will let them in the door. So if the party agrees to help, open the door quickly, encouraging them to enter before any of the animals escape. There. Because obviously we don't want creatures just running around in the forest where it's dangerous. That would be bad. So you'll give a description of the interior of the tower. So for this, we might say that this is a tower that's bigger on the inside. Hey, thanks, Graham. I appreciate it. You're cool. So we'll say that the tower is bigger on the inside. Inside, we can say that it's maybe 60 feet across. But still circular in shape. We can say that let's for making this interesting, we'll say that there's kind of high vaulted ceilings. Vaulted ceilings with some kind of wooden structure, perhaps an arch in the middle. And then you're going to describe kind of what you see around the room. There's a bed over here. There's a table over there. Yeah, it could be Gothic architecture. I dig it. These are the fun details that you can get into as you describe this in the game. And honestly, descriptions are a lot of fun in sessions. I have, on occasion before, had players who really get invested in the details about a specific thing that I've described. I think if Rakelai is still in chat, he can attest to one session where I probably spent 10 to 15 minutes describing what a caterpillar on a plant looked like, because one of the characters was really invested in the biological life forms on this particular planet that we were in. This was a sci-fi thing. There was a caterpillar that was crawling up a hollow plant with some kind of milky, edible substance on the inside, and you can get it really lost in details if the players are interested in that, and that's an exciting thing. It's a really exciting thing. So, yeah, I encourage getting into the details like that. Vaulted ceiling, large wooden arch in the middle. We'll say that there's a table in this corner, a bed in that corner. We've got our chest over here. Yeah, I absolutely do. Because if you've got a detail that that the players are so invested in, it's more fun to make that seem significant later on. So maybe that caterpillar is somehow associated with the big bad. Maybe that caterpillar is the familiar for a wizard or something like that. There's lots of options in order to make it tie in, if you really want to. I once, on a whim, created a game on the fly in a session because the party met a small child who wanted to play a game with some of the players, some of the characters, and they said, okay, yeah, sure, what game are we going to play? And I was like, oh, well, the kid is just going to take you off and show you some game. Like, yeah, I know, but like, what type of game? It's like, okay, the kid describes to you this game called Stickball. It's a game where you stick 3 sticks into the ground, and you try to balance the ball on top of these 3 sticks. It's, helpful for learning architecture or something, right? And I just like improvise this game off the top of my head. And Stickball has showed up in every single game session since that session because the players are invested in becoming stickball masters. And so I have them roll sleight of hand checks every time to see if they can balance it just properly. And it's this literally pointless game that I wrote on the fly. I was like, yeah, sure, here's a game. what are we gonna do? Balance a ball on some sticks. Go for it. And it's stuck because that's how D&D goes. And sometimes people just like pick this weird detail that they just love. It really is. There's gonna be some stickball tournaments really soon. They just taught it to a bunch of people in our last session. It's the new worldwide phenomena. Stickball. Okay, back to designing our adventure. Hey Lee, how's it going? Yeah. So, we've got some details about the tower, the interior. You'll fill it out with whatever you need. If, like in the example, the rat is inside of a chest, you'll want there to be a chest. The hawk will need to be perched up on a ledge somewhere, perhaps on top of a bookshelf. You'll find a place for it. You'll fill that in based on what you need. We'll continue on for the time being. We're gonna say, what are the critters that that are involved here? Let's say that there are 5 animals. This makes sense. This is sticking with the module that we're kind of basing this off of. We'll say there's a rat, a cat. I actually like, in past instances where I've done this, I've changed the hawk into an owl. I do like the snake as an option because that's potentially, you know, a slightly more dangerous animal. And then for our final one, what should we do? We'll use the bat. So these are all pretty much, except for the owl being swapped in for the hawk, these are all what's in the Book of Challenges version that we're basing this off of. So, as a DM, I want to have these stat blocks available to me. Whether that means you have your monster manual right in your hand, mine is right here by my desk. Whether that means you have your monster manual or you've got them pulled up on D&D Beyond or something like that in another tab, you want to have it. It's important to know, for instance, you know, what their dexterity is, what their strength is, what their wisdom is, in case, you know, someone tries to grapple the cat. You want to know its ability scores to be able to roll a contested grapple check. If they try to trick the owl, or cast a spell that requires some kind of wisdom saving throw, you want to know what the owl's wisdom score is to know how to roll that DC, or roll that saving throw. So it's helpful to have that information available to you. A good rule of thumb when you're writing an adventure that you're going to publish, especially if it is something you want to publish standalone, you should have all the stat blocks for all the relevant opponents that you're going to face, or in this case, animals. All those stat blocks should appear in the module. If it's not too much of a layout hassle, I recommend putting it right there in the text, because flipping back and forth from, okay, I need the rat stat block, to Appendix A where you've got stat blocks for rats, and flipping back and forth can be a bit of a nuisance. I would much rather have it right there in the text with me. It makes the DM's life easier. They will thank you later, I promise. So, we've got that. We aren't going to grab the stat blocks here, other than to say that we should grab them. Let's maybe get one just for funsies. So let me just, in another tab really quickly, I will pop open D&D Beyond, which is what I use whenever I'm doing something online, and we'll do a cat. And I will drag this over here and put this in our browser. We've now got a cat. So if I need to make a dex check, I've got a dex check. If I need to make a wisdom saving throw, I've got wisdom saving throw. All that stuff is right there, handy to have. I'm not gonna write all this in here, just in the interest of time, but normally I would like take a picture and insert a picture into my notes. And of course, if you're publishing this, then you want to write this out and have your layout editor do a nice fancy stat block for it. Or there's some programs out there that'll do that for you too. Depends on how much control over formatting you want. Because if you want a lot of control or want to do something unique, then you're going to want to do that yourself or have your layout person do it. And then if not, then you can probably use something that's pre-generated. So this is what we're going to work with. We've got our animals. We know our stats. Now, what I really liked in this example module that we used is it gave us a paragraph describing what each critter was going to do. Because what you want to do is you want to give very clear instructions to the DM as to what they're going to have to do. So we can kind of do the same thing here. What let's do is let's just for each of these, and we'll just go through them in the order that we have. Rat is hiding in a chest at the foot of the bed. It crawled through a small hole in the side of the chest. The chest is locked, and I'll put here a note, DC 15 to unlock. Of course, you may have a wizard who has some, or you may have someone who has like a spell to unlock a chest or something like that. Knock, I think, is that spell. So there's some options, but you want to give yourself all the relevant information just in case. If someone reaches into the hole, the rat will bite them. There we go. We've got some basics for the rat. The rat is kind of cornered itself, so we won't give too much detail about what might happen if it tries to run away because it's a little bit cornered. We'll see if that happens, and we'll include a section later for just generally, perhaps all the critters might try to escape if the door is left open or something. We'll move on to the cat next. You just want to give your DM just some basic guidelines for what are we going to do here, because that makes life so much easier. So the cat is, I'll just copy from the book again, is on the bed hissing at anyone who comes near. I'll make a note here, animal handling DC 13 to calm down, or it will bite anyone who gets close. Or it'll scratch anyone who gets close, because we've already got the rat biting, so we don't want to just have every creature bite them. We'll diversify it a little bit, and so we'll go ahead and have it just reach out with its claws and scratch. This isn't a bitey cat. This is a scratchy cat. Maybe we'll have bitey cats elsewhere, but not here. Not now. Not now, Kayla. We'll run away if anyone tries and fails to grapple it. This is significant. You want to know what might happen if certain things develop, especially if we know that the critters are going to need to be caught and put back into cages, it makes sense to have some kind of, okay, next step if you try and fail. I should mention, perhaps, in this section that there is a pile of, I won't say pile, I'll say cages scattered across the middle of the floor, because we do need to put the animals back into the cages. That's important. There needs to be a place to put them. So that's significant. So we'll go ahead and do that. Next up, we'll do the owl. The owl is where should we have the owl be perched? Let's pick up a detail. Perhaps let's say a of a crossbeam, about 15. We'll say 15 feet. So perhaps there's some way that they could convince it to come down by offering food or something of that nature. Perhaps they could do something to convince it to come down of its own free will. Or if not, you'll have to find some way to get it down, perhaps by standing on a table and reaching out with a long object, a broom or something. Or perhaps you'll need to cast sleep. I don't know. There's options. I'm not going to tell you how the party's going to figure it out. But you want it to be possible to get to the creature. So we'll go ahead and do this. We'll say another animal handling, but this one will be DC 17 to convince it to come down. It will attack anyone who tries. It will defend itself. It'll defend itself. This is not a mean owl. This is a kind owl, a wise old owl, perhaps with nice proverbs, wise things to say. The owl will fly away if an attempt to grapple it fails. But you'll notice that if it's inside of the tower, right, and there's no doors or windows open, it can't go anywhere, but it'll fly around, perhaps perching somewhere else, perhaps landing on a counter or a bookshelf. This is something significant to just keep in mind. Hey, Tyler, welcome. Welcome. We're just designing a quick 3-hour adventure of wrangling animals. So, we're describing what each critter is going to do. The snake. What shall the snake do? We'll say is hiding under the table, which provides half cover. Now, as someone who knows D&D rules pretty well, I sometimes still forget what half cover does. I believe that it is +2 to AC, and I've just looked it up, and that is correct. So, We'll go ahead and put this here as a note to ourselves because that's an important detail to know what our actual modifier to that armor class is. The snake will bite anyone who tries to grab it, but would prefer to flee rather than fight. This gives some options. It can be chased back into its cage if the party is clever enough. This gives some options for how this might play out. And while it doesn't tell the DM, hey, this has to happen, it does say, hey, if they try to do this, maybe this makes sense. Maybe let them do that. And then last but not least, we've got the bat. And what I think would be fun is if the bat was asleep. So we'll say that the bat is hanging from the ceiling. Did we specify? We didn't specify how high the ceiling was. We'll say 20 feet in the air. Asleep. So the challenge, perhaps the biggest challenge in this room, will be getting to the bat in order to get it. But since it's asleep, it'll be easy to grab. You just have to get there. But this is a puzzle. How are the players going to do this? They might need to stack a chair on top of a table in order to give themselves a height advantage. They might need, a character to hold another character up. They might need to toss a smaller creature up, a smaller character up. If you have like a Goliath and a gnome, perhaps the Goliath could toss the gnome into the air. This presents some element of challenge that will make it a little bit more difficult, but not necessarily impossible. Hey there, Addie. How's it going? Only very loud noises will wake up the bat, so it will remain asleep in most circumstances. This is helpful information. Oh, nice. Very fun. We're doing all right. We're just working on this little adventure where we're going to go catch some animals that have escaped from their cages. So we're just describing what each animal will do during this as we would go into, initiative roll, have some kind of mock combat. Since it's asleep, grabbing it would be quite easy. So the real question here is just, do we add anything else? I don't know that we need to add anything else to this particular one because the bat is asleep. They're not doing much. They are passed out, resting. So I think we're okay. But what we can do is we can just do a quick development. If the door is left open or a window is opened during I'll say while the party tries to catch the animals, any of the animals that are frightened or angry may attempt to flee. And so this maybe raises the stakes a little bit. If a door is left open or if a window is opened, suddenly you have to worry about, okay, well, is the owl going to fly out the door? Because that could be a very legitimate concern. Hey, Hakmir. So we've got that as our development. I'm gonna throw a period there because otherwise formatting is gonna bother me. Yeah. So as we continue on, we're gonna write some kind of resolution. Because that isn't included in this initial adventure, but we've probably got somewhere in the realm of an hour to an hour and a half. So perhaps we'll include a social encounter after this. And especially if we're looking at taking a break during this session, as many groups do, we've got most of the session figured out. We just need about an hour of content left. And so we could add a social encounter at the beginning. Perhaps maybe there's some instigating event that causes the party to travel through the woods to begin with. Or maybe there's something at the end where you do go on and complete whatever task it is that they've been given initially. Perhaps a great way to do this. So let's come back to the top. And let's say as our first kind of our prompt here, what they're doing is the party has been hired. Yeah, go ahead and ask away. We are open to chatting about stuff here. Feel free to ask questions or pitch in ideas as seems fit. Has been hired by, let's say, a local. We'll say. By the head of the town guard. Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about here, honestly, Addie. So I'm glad that you've joined. The key to finishing a session in your 2 to 3 hours and having it be all-encompassing and very enjoyable. Actually, is kind of what we opened with, where we had some kind of key bullet points in order to make what we're doing here a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and go over those bullet points very quickly, and I'll talk through them. It helps to have a very focused plot. So, for instance, as an example of not doing this very well, I once tried to run like a whodunit murder mystery type of game. And I tried to do it in one session. We had about 3 hours. And there was so much complexity to the plot of that session that we didn't complete it. We went for a little while, and we got to the end of the session, and there had been no combat. It was all social encounters, and they hadn't even figured out who did it. And so that entire session I had to schedule a second session in order to finish it. And we were able to do that in 2 sessions. It wasn't horrible. But it took some time in order to get through that because my plot was not very focused. It wasn't very streamlined. There were so many different intricacies, and the party had gotten caught up with one lie that someone told because they didn't roll high enough on an insight check to determine that it was a lie. And so they were following this false lead for a long time. So it really helps to have something that's kind of streamlined and focused. So for this kind of example, we're going to say that the party has been hired by the head of the town guard to track down a druid in the forest who is causing trouble. So this gives the party a reason to be walking through the forest, and means that if they're able to get through this encounter, catching all the animals very quickly, we've got something to finish up. But if that takes most of the session, then perhaps they realize that one of these critters is actually the druid wild-shaped. And so that gives us some options here as we're writing a session. In order to put that into an adventure module, there'd be some work to do to make it all format nicely, but that's kind of tough. So focused is our first bullet point. Multiple hooks is our second bullet point. With any adventure, you want to have more than just one reason why the party should get involved, because it's entirely possible that they may not be persuaded that first time, and so they're going to want to go do something else or check something else out, and having a second or third or fourth reason to pull them into this narrative is very important, because that's going to keep things moving, right? You don't want to spend 30 minutes trying to convince them, no, you really do need to go do this thing. Every NPC is telling you to go do this thing. Have another reason. So in this case, maybe they, we gave the example, maybe they don't want to help this poor servant who's lost control of the critters that have gotten away. Well, maybe the servant serves a wizard that the party knows named Morgana. Maybe a rival of this druid, perhaps that they're looking for, has cast a spell to make the animals harder to catch. An enlarged cat would, after all, be quite terrifying. You need a couple of reasons to get them invested in what's going on. Beyond just one, it helps to have two or three, just to help keep things moving, because the sooner you can get them invested in whatever it is that needs to be done, the sooner they're going to be on board and do it. I recommend 3 to 4 encounters. About 1 encounter an hour is what I feel like works. If it's a social encounter, it may not take as long, but combat tends to take a while. It really does. And so you don't want, a string of 4 combat encounters in a 3-hour session, unless 2 to 3 of those are much shorter combat encounters. But I find that you can normally accomplish like 1 major task each hour in a game, so long as everyone's focused without issue. Sometimes it'll be a little bit longer than that. Sometimes it'll be a little bit shorter than that. That's kind of an average deal. And so if you kind of know, okay, here's how long I've got, and try to plan accordingly, you can have multiple encounters and have some extra encounters lined up. Maybe in this scenario, if we're doing really well on time because they're able to catch all the animals first round, then there's a wild bear that attacks from the forest. This is all based off of a challenge here from the Book of Challenges, which is published as a supplement to Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, called A Familiar Situation, on, I think, page 7 of this book. It is a really cool book with just like puzzles, dungeon rooms, traps, and stuff like that. And this particular one is my favorite by far in here. I use it as my go-to session 0 for new groups, because you get to a feel for party dynamics. Combat is very low stakes because you're just trying to catch animals. It's very simple. But that's the fun of it. And people get so excited about catching animals. People like animals. It's just great all across the board. So, they've been hired to track down a druid in the forest who's causing trouble. I'll give an example of what that trouble might look like. Perhaps planting trees in the middle of the road and releasing animals from hunters' traps. So there's a reason why perhaps the town is invested in seeing this druid brought in or dealt with or something. Now this also presents an interesting moral quandary, because perhaps the party and the players decide that they would rather side with the druid, who is standing up for nature against, the spread of industrialism or who knows what. That makes for an interesting thing too, because they could choose to help the druid, which is phenomenally interesting if you set something up for the party to do and then they decide to do the opposite. And that's something you should consider as well. Perhaps, maybe that's even part of it, is when they first meet the druid has a soliloquy, a speech of sorts, to try to convince them of the evils of the town. So we'll go ahead and add that in. And I'll make a note to myself here, as the DM for this session. I'll say, note to self, if short on time, the owl is the wild-shaped druid. Or maybe there's an additional animal who comes out. We'll say there is a second owl who is the wild-shaped druid. Now that's a little surprise that you could pull on the players. Yeah, we'll do that. That's fine. Okay. There's a little something. If you're running short on time, cut down on encounters. I always come into a session with a couple of encounters. I gave an example earlier. I had 3 encounters prepared for my D&D game last night that I ran. Our party only got through 2. That's an ongoing campaign, so I'll just save the 3rd one for later. But we were able to get to a somewhat satisfying resolution of the session. And that would be, a good example of when you might need... Oh, a note to self here. Yeah, I do play with people that I don't know all the time. Not as often these days, just because scheduling's a little tough. But on occasion I do, in fact, run games for people on my Discord server, or, run games for friends online. Oftentimes that won't be streamed, that'll be an offline game, but, yeah, running games for strangers can be a lot of fun too, if you're especially itching to play with someone and don't have a group that's able to go. So yeah, maybe at some point. Although I will not run this because obviously y'all are all here in chat, and if one of you happened to be a player in that game, then you would know what's going to happen. Which we can't have spoilers. All right, thanks, Snipe. I'm gonna drink some water. So, but let's say that we get through this and we're only 2 out of 3 hours in. Well then, the party still has an hour to find and catch the druid. And what may be a good way to introduce then this combat encounter with the druid is we could have the druid be wild shaped. Oh, it's certainly possible. Not to worry. For anyone who is in chat who is not in my Discord, if you are looking for ways to chat with me, maybe to ask me a D&D question when I'm not streaming, or if you're not connected with me on Twitter or elsewhere, my Discord channel is a great place to hang out. I often announce what I'm going to do on stream before I announce it on Twitter in my Discord. We did some spitballing for sessions like this that we could do on stream. And this stream today came out of a conversation that took place in Discord. So that's a good place to hang out. And occasionally we will, do games in there. Oftentimes if I'm looking to playtest something, an adventure, or I had a micro RPG system that I've got in the works that I did some playtesting sessions with a while back, and members of my Discord were some of the first ones that I asked to be involved. So I would recommend that if you're looking to get into a game with me, that's a good place to do it. Because if I am looking for players for something, I will oftentimes ask folks in the Discord first. So, the party continue searching for the druid. Now, we're obviously going to want a stat block for this druid. We can worry about that at a later time. But let's say that the druid attacks the party wild shaped as a bear. And we'll say a brown bear because you want to give a specific stat block. Hey, thanks for that follow. So we've got our specific stat block now. Brown bear stat block is one that druids can do pretty early on. So we've got what we need here. We'll not worry about collecting the stat block both for the brown bear and for the druid now. So let's focus on how do we resolve this narrative. We've got this adventure that the party has gone on where they traveled through the woods. They've helped a random stranger catch some wild animals that got loose in a wizard tower. And after that, perhaps they've had a chance to catch and subdue this druid, who will be, comparably low level to them. How do we resolve this? It helps to think about multiple ways that this could go. So, perhaps the party is successful in catching this druid and they take them back. There would be some reward, of course, perhaps some thanks from the town guard. We can think about that. So we'll say resolution here. If successful, the party receives payment of, it's a fake currency, it's a game, especially if this is a one shot, give them however much you want, 100 gold a person, 50 gold a person, I don't know, per person. Is thanked personally by the head of the guard. The party is unsuccessful or chooses to help the druid. And so if the druid attacks them right off the bat, that perhaps makes it challenging. But that's a good way to get to the druid encounter quickly. But perhaps there could still be some conversation even after the druid is captured, or perhaps the druid decides after seeing them help in the tower, they think maybe they could convince the party. There's some options here. So I'll actually include an option for the druid may also attempt to convince the party that the town, let's say that the town needs to be stopped because it was founded too close to an owl bear's cave, which is a danger to both the town and the owlbear, right? Or perhaps there's something, more like environmentally concerned. Perhaps they are polluting the nearby water, or perhaps the town's guard is actually evil, and are trying to cut down the forest. You can do what you want. I'll leave this here for the time being. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a fantasy game and you can do what you want, and each person's game can look a little bit different. So if the party chooses to help the druid, then we would go through perhaps a quick montage of how they would like to assist the druid here. So you're trying to help by playing these tricks on the town guard, or perhaps you're trying to convince them, or maybe you go back and you try to persuade the town that they are actually in danger. There are a couple ways that could play out, and the DM will kind of have to be flexible here. You can't necessarily prepare for every single option, but you should get all the major ones. So let's say that the party tries to go back to convince the town that they need to move, or be careful, or something of that nature. It will take a DC, let's say 18 persuasion check to convince the town of the danger they're in. Alternatively, maybe they choose to do like some illusion or some trick to convince the town to leave. To perform some trick or illusion to convince the town to relocate. Yeah, if you could just pick it up and move it, that would be awesome. Then we could set some stipulations. So maybe they try to do some kind of illusion to scare them off, or come in to make some noises, or make the sound of wild animals at night. We can come up with some ways that this would happen. I think the best thing to do in order to wrap this up in a timely manner without getting too complicated, must cumulatively succeed on 3 or more checks to succeed while more checks while doing this. So we give them some threshold, some bar. So perhaps they decide to make the sounds of wild animals at night, and they're out in the forest howling and growling. You could have them make a performance check. And again, these are what I would use for DM notes, not necessarily what I would use if I was writing out an adventure to publish it, but just in the interest of time, we don't have time to write a 10,000 word document for publication today in our stream, when we're already at 2 hours and we don't have time for that. So okay. So if they try to do this, whatever. If they help the druid, then he will express his thanks and bestow perhaps an animal familiar, a small bear cub, to oh, I see. The party must succeed. Okay. a small bear cub to run to, we'll just say to the party. So then the party has a pet bear, a baby bear. That's cute. They would like that. Most parties are excited about the potential of some kind of pet or something like that. So, you know, this is a good reward in lieu of money, because you do want to feel like the adventure is worth it. There has to be some kind of satisfying resolution. So this is an adventure that could easily, if it ran really, really smoothly, be done in 2.5 hours. But if they took their time, if they role-played through a lot of things, this could be a full 4-hour adventure right here. And this is relatively quick. So that's kind of what I've got in terms of, you know, using this as an example, as a demo, for how this might be done. Does anyone have any questions or anything? Stuff about like, hey, what would you do in this type of scenario? Or have you ever thought about doing like that type of thing? I'd be happy to answer some questions while we're here. And if there's no question or anything, that's okay too. But I would be happy to help, or if someone has like, hey, I'm working on this, what would you do in this scenario? I'd be happy to do that as well. But yeah, you know, I've got a little while. Happy to stick around and answer some questions if anyone has any. And if not, then we can go ahead and wrap up pretty shortly here. And that's okay too, because, you know, we don't necessarily need this to go super long. I do intend to take this and put this on YouTube, so that if anyone wants to come back and check this out after the fact, or if you like know someone who's a new DM or something like that and interested in learning how to do certain stuff, we can have this as a resource for them. I also realize that everything that I've said here is specific to me, which means that you know, someone else might look at what I've done here and say, I don't like that at all. There's not high enough stakes, or it doesn't feel like silly enough. Hey Maverick, welcome. But you know, you want to give options. And I like to do these kind of more lighthearted adventures like this. So yeah, it'll probably be over on YouTube by the end of the week, I hope. And I'll tweet about that when it goes out. I am looking to do more of these because this has been fun, and I feel like this has gone pretty well. So if there are topics that you would like to see covered in future little DM lessons like this, let me know. You can drop an idea in chat right now and I'll write it down. You can join the Discord and suggest it there. You can send me a message or a tweet and say, hey, I really liked what you did, go give me the other thing. Or I really hated what you did, do this other thing instead. And I'm happy to give some other topics. We did talk in my stream on Sunday at length about character creation, particularly as it pertains to coming up with character backstory. So that's a fun thing that we could maybe revisit at some point. Yeah, and hey, if you've enjoyed this, I would recommend coming and hanging out over at Lily Sparks' Twitch channel on Saturday. Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be joining a storytellers panel with some phenomenal people, including Gabe James Games, Mackenzie Lane de Armas, and Ed Greenwood, I think. I'm pretty sure. Am I misremembering? Yeah. Yeah. That's Ed Greenwood. And Lucia Searsword, who was involved in the Cena Una project. So come hang out with us and Lily over there as part of her birthday celebration. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll talk about storytelling in games, maybe some content similar to this. Have I thought about doing a post-mortem after action on some of your other one-shots or games? Oh, that's actually kind of a cool idea, Maverick. I like that a lot. Perhaps we could do that. Or maybe I could just tie that into other lessons. I do try to, as I'm going through stuff here, give examples for how something has played out before. And so, you know, like I gave some examples, not just of how things play out in the challenge here that this adventure that we just kind of wrote is based off of, but, you know, I gave some examples from, like, my session last night and whatnot, so I think using those as real-life examples might be good ways to go about it. But, yeah, I think that's a good, kind of a cool idea to do. It's actually a really cool idea to do. So yeah, that's a great idea. It's a great idea, Maverick. I like that a lot. But yeah, so feel free to suggest some other topics if there's anything you want to talk about. At some point, I may actually do some real DM prep with y'all. My DM prep tends to be super light. Like, this is honestly more prep than I would do in terms of writing things out for a session. I would have a couple of bullet points. They'd all be a little bit longer than this. A couple of descriptions, a list of about 5 or 6 names, and then just the relevant stat blocks. Because my prep is super simple, and I improvise a lot of what I'm doing. Once I have the idea and the concept, it's easy to kind of go with the flow. But I've given some more details here in terms of, like, structuring an adventure. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. Okay, so if there are no other questions or anything else, we'll wrap up here. Thanks for joining us. I do have lots of good D&D content available on the DM's Guild. I've got the Dice Goblin on DriveThruRPG. You can find an adventure that I've written. If you want to see what it looks like to play an adventure that Josh wrote, you can check out the Dragon Flu Pandemic module that I wrote with Mage Hand Press back in April, which is a module that we, as we released it, the whole point was it's for charity. So all proceeds from sales for that module go to Feeding America, an organization that helps fill food banks, and especially right now while people are out of work and stuff like that. That's you know, a cause that could use help. And you can find it conveniently. Nightbot is on top of things. You can find a link to the Dragon Flu Pandemic in my link tree right there with the links. It'll be listed like MHP Dragon Flu Pandemic, I think, or Mage Hand Press Dragon Flu Pandemic. If you want to see what that looks like, it's a couple bucks, and it's an adventure that I wrote. And uniquely in that adventure, I set up a prompt, and then there's immediately 2 branching story paths, which isn't what I've recommended here. I said, you know, pick something and focus on it, but it also is because you're told, here's a task that you need to accomplish. There are 2 ways to do it. Which one do you choose? And so that's kind of fun. And the nice thing is you can play that module twice and be surprised both times if you take the different paths, which is kind of fun. Plus, there's a whole lot of random encounters. I put some road encounters in there with some cool stuff. So if you want to check that out, feel free to check that out. If you want to see me on stream other times, I've already mentioned Lily's birthday stream on Saturday. After the Storytellers panel at 1 Eastern, I will be part of a Masks game at 4:30 Eastern. It's my first time playing Masks. I'll be playing with some really cool people, which I am stoked about. And we're actually doing character creation later this evening together, so that's going to be a blast. I highly recommend joining us for that. It's going to be fun. And Lily's got fun stuff for her birthday tomorrow, and Friday, as well as on Saturday. So that's worth checking out. And of course, you can always find me here. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Patreon. I've got a Facebook page. You can find me on all the social media and come hang out with me. You can find most of that in my links as well. And if you're interested in seeing what it looks like when I play a game on stream, you can check me out on Friday with some friends over at the Rock Punch ATL channel, where we play a game using the Cena Una supplement. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, like I said, I'll be putting this on my YouTube channel. I think I've got a link to that. That's my YouTube channel if you want to go check that out. I do have a couple of old games. All of my charity one-shots are on there. If you want to see what those look like, see how I run a game, you're welcome to do that. Yeah, alrighty. Let's go ahead and take a moment. I am going to flip us over to this screen, and I'm going to see if there's anyone that we want to raid, because that's what you do on Twitch, is you raid people. Oh, you know what we should do? We are going to go raid my friend Jen. If you don't know Jen, she plays D&D over on the D&D Beyond channel. On Silver and Steel on Tuesdays. And in addition to that, she is a phenomenal advocate for disabilities and is a very, very experienced DM. Phenomenal role player. I highly recommend coming on over and checking out her stream. She's awesome. Seriously, one of the coolest people out there. Oh shoot, that's not the right name. I stopped typing before I finished her name. There we go. We're going to raid Dreamwisp Jen. I highly recommend coming over and hanging out. It's going to be a blast. And she's talking about D&D, doing the exact same stuff that we're doing right now. Not necessarily talking about like planning a session so much as just talking about mechanics and rules and lore and stuff like that. You're bound to learn a lot. Thanks for being here. If you have not yet, vote. If there's still time for you to register to vote and you haven't done that yet, do that. Most importantly, please take care of yourselves. It's tough right now. There's a lot going on in the world. It's easy to become frustrated, depressed, and while that's perfectly normal and acceptable and honestly expected with the state of things, it's important to give yourself time to rest, to take care of yourself. So make sure you're hydrating and getting enough sleep and all that stuff. And I'll see y'all next time. All right. Take it easy, friends, and be good to one another.